Good evening, everybody. I hope you've had a wonderful day, and we have a good amount of things to talk about. So, we're going to go ahead and get started on all that stuff here. First of all, if you're new here, please like, comment, share, subscribe, all that other good stuff. You'll notice the QR code up in the top left-hand corner of your screen. That's for donations to my Buy Me a Coffee account. If you wish to donate money, I'd rather do that than super chats, even though I am capable of doing them. I don't really like going that route because, one, YouTube gets half the money, and two, if you don't have it, don't feel the need to give it to me, and that's only if you guys want to make those donations and everything like that. What you do don't donate goes back into the equipment I use for the channel and subscriptions and stuff like that I use for research and everything along those lines. So we've got a multitude of different topics here. We've got four primary ones. One, we're going to talk a little bit about the Canes training camp schedule. We're going to talk about the roster for the prospect showcase, and I'll talk about which prospects I'm watching the most. You guys that have watched me a lot know which ones that I'm going to be watching the most, but I'll go into a little bit more detail about some of them here. We're going to talk a little bit about the possibility of Jack Roslovic still coming back and who might get moved in order to make that happen because they'd have to free up a roster spot. And then last, we are going to talk about something that probably won't happen, but just for the sake of entertaining it, we'll talk about Kirill Kaprizov possibly becoming a Hurricane. So we'll go ahead and get started on that right here. First things first, the traditional don't sue me slide. I don't own any of the data. I just compile it from these sources and various different others. And I've actually found a couple of new websites I'm going to start using and referencing if they're any good and everything like that. But just none of the information is anything that I came up with. I pulled it from various different data sites. So the first thing that we're going to cover here, this is relevant to the Canes as a whole. Projected cap space, $10,644,184. For a contending team, that's about 10 times more cap space conservatively than you normally have. Deadline cap space, the space that accrues over the course of the season. Let's say they don't make any more trades. They don't have to do any call-ups, anything like that. Or I'm sorry, if they don't have to have any paper moves or they don't do any paper moves or anything like that. That will accrue to $48,659 or $659,127 at the deadline. That is a lot of money to be left on the table. And Dundon, he doesn't like dead money. He also doesn't like empty cap. At that point, by the time the season's over, I'm expecting that some way or another to get filled. I wouldn't be surprised if they had a player sooner rather than later. But with what they have right now, if they did not make any roster transactions at all from the day the season started to the day the season ended, that's how much cap space they would have. So I'm going to be very surprised if they don't make some sort of move. As far as what they could potentially do, and like I said, this is not a big possibility. Kirill Kaprizov rejected a $128 million 8-year deal. And now they're calling him Dollar Bill Kaprizov because of it. Even though I'd heard him called that a couple of times before. Daria, I have no idea how to say her last name, but I've seen her on X at times. Per journalist Alexei Shevchenko, the Minnesota Wild have asked Kirill Kaprizov for his trade list. Now, people are saying that, maybe that's not the case. Foreign media, a lot of times, especially when you're talking about somebody who's talking to a journalist in their country that they're from, and I've noticed it with Finns, with Swedes, with Russians, they tend to be a little bit more honest. Or there's times where things are mistranslated. So it could go either way. It's something to keep an eye on. Minnesota has an incentive to trade Kirill Kaprizov out east so that they don't have to play against him more than twice a year, for one thing. And if they do see him again, it means that their team got to the Stanley Cup Finals, and so did the team that they made the trade with got there. So at that point, you can basically say it worked out for both sides. Additionally, even though it looked like for a long time that it was a foregone conclusion that Jack Roslovic would be gone, Frank Saravelli stated on one of his shows recently, You've got your contenders that are sort of looking to see if Jack Roslovic is willing to bet on himself and take a short-term, short money deal. I don't think the door is 100% completely closed in Carolina, Leafs, Canucks. All three of those destinations make sense. Now, if Roslovic does return to Carolina, somebody's got to go. And that also raises the question of who goes. And that also raises the question of where would Roslovic slot in if he did come back. And we'll get into all that, talking about him in particular. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Jack Roslovic. This is his player grade slide that I did from last season. I've reworked these. They're going to look a whole lot better by the time you see player grades again. And I'm also going to try and do them every 20 games or so during the regular season. It's a lot of data to enter and everything like that, but we'll see how it goes. 81 games played, 1349 time on ice. He had 22 goals. Now, one thing I want to highlight, when the season started, Roslovic was on a tear with goal scoring. He showed a bit of selfishness. He's got a wicked-ass shot. 1 second, please. He's got a wicked shot. He's got some wheels. His biggest downfall, or I won't even call it a downfall because it's a correctable problem, I think, even though he was already with the Canes for an entire season. He gets lost on the back check. It's not for a lack of effort, and it sure as hell ain't for a lack of speed either. But he kind of gets on the back check, and he kind of loses where he's supposed to be. Man-on-man system, that can be difficult. I think another training camp and a little bit more adjustment to it, that he could rectify that. Roslovic, even though he spent most of his time on the wing, he did spend some time at center in a lot of it, and he's got a lot of good attributes as a center that could potentially be used. So the next thing, assists. He had 17 of those. Roslovic's definitely more of a shooter than a playmaker, but this team's got plenty of playmakers on it, so I'm not too upset about that. So 39 points. He had a 54.1 face-off percentage. The reason the asterisk is next to that is because a lot of times he took face-offs was when someone got waved out. So that's actually an incredibly good number for somebody who's taking a lot of face-offs after wave-outs, because, as you know, the second guy that comes in, he's not as aggressive a lot of times because he doesn't want to get a delay game face-off violation penalty, so that's excellent. Individual expected goals also percentage in all situations, 17.54, and he's got 22 goals. So he's scoring damn near 5 above expected. That's a good thing. Blocked 23 shots through 14 hits, had 19 takeaways, 63 giveaways. He was ultimately a minus 10, but you guys know my my thoughts on my thoughts on plus minus. I think it's a kind of a garbage stat, and it's outdated, and the way that they do it needs to change. And you've got so many better options now. For example, expected goals percentage, Roslovic had a 56.81, and in shot percentage, 15.8. That's actually really, really good. This player has a lot more good qualities than bad. 5-on-5, he clocked 971 minutes and 37 seconds total of ice time. Of his 22 goals, 19 of them came 5-on-5. Of his 17 assists, 8 of them were primary assists 5-on-5. And 7 of them were secondary assists. So 34 of his 39 points came on at 5-on-5, and the rest of them predominantly came from the power play, where he had 1 goal and 1 assist for a total of 2 points. And I believe his other point was an assist on an empty net goal, if I remember correctly. Power play, he had an individual expected goals of 2.87. Face-off was a little bit lower, but he wasn't taking them very much, being on the second unit and all. Expected goals 4 total, 12.96. On ice goals 4-4. So that could be better, but the second power play unit does lack some lethality. I've talked about that before. Hopefully that's something that can be rectified here in the near future in the event that they do bring Roslovic back. So I'm going to take this off, or I want to show you one more thing, then I'm going to take this off the screen. I'm going to talk about Jack a little bit here. So his previous contract was $2.8 million 1 year. It was kind of a prove-it deal. There was some speculation that last year that Roslovic might be tried as an extensive second-line center. The thing is, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, as much as I love the kid, when they tried him out on wing in the playoffs a couple of years ago, it was a disaster. He's as pure of a center as they come. Now, how good he is debatable. Whether you want to say he's a middle six guy, a second liner, a definitive third liner, which is what I think, but I think he's a really good player. He's got his faults. He definitely needs to work on his skating, which is what I hope he did mostly this summer, but he's got a lot of physicality to him and everything like that. When you look at someone like Jack Roslovic playing center, he's more of the speed game, the possession game, the I'm going to do it myself game. I'm going to create this entry. And he does a lot of this stuff when he wins faceoffs and on transition plays. He definitely helps out possession, and a lot of times he manages to finish on it as well. Now, top skating speed, I did notice there was a difference in his NHL edge data in the playoffs versus the regular season. There was about a 0.7 of a mile per hour average fall off on his speed. Nothing to be alarmed about. After that long season, there's going to be some guys that slow down a little bit in the playoffs because they're fighting through injuries and everything like that. But top skating speed, 22.89 miles per hour, a little bit above the league average position at the 79 percentile. A lot of speed bursts over 100, over 20 miles an hour. Had a total of 144 at the 76 and the 84 percentile in the league. Covers a lot of ice really quick as well. Has a wicked shot, dude. 91.48 for a top shot speed. And that's well above the league average, putting him in the 85th percentile. Pretty frequent shooter in the 74th percentile there. League average by position of shot percentage is 12.7. Roslovic has a 15.8 in the 76th percentile. Anywhere where the Hurricanes can get guys who can pull the trigger and get a goal, they need to do it. So I understand why there's some consideration of bringing Roslovic back. Looked like Rod liked him. It looked like Roslovic liked playing with the Canes, so we'll see what happens. And being a 20-goal scorer is nothing to sneeze at because, as you can tell here, 22 goals gets you into the 81 percentile of the league, and that's actually really, really good. Now, taking this off screen and talking about some of the intangibles that Jack Roslovic brought to the table as a Cane last year. He was really, really good at offensive zone forechecking, forcing someone down below the goal line, and managing to use his body to box people out and get the puck back and make plays, whether that was trying to give a good short centering pass or go to the front of the net and stuff it in himself. When it came to being someone who separated someone else from the puck, regained possession of it, and bought time and space for himself and the teammates and could withstand people draped all over him trying to get a puck away from him, he was really good at that. Additionally, I know I talked about this a little bit before already, speed. Roslovic's a speed demon. Speed is one of the paramount things that you need to play for the Hurricanes. He has that. Drawbacks, or excuse me, I'll promote another thing. His face-offs were really good. So when you're talking about the positives to Roslovic's game and how it fits in with the Hurricanes, there's a lot more good than bad. A lot more good than bad. So you're talking about a guy who wins in the circle, guy who's got the speed to get back, gets lost on the back check once in a while, but has the speed to get back, supplements the forecheck, and he creates a lot of plays, and he finishes on a lot of plays, but he's definitely more of a shooter than a playmaker, and there's enough playmakers on this team. So in that regard, bringing Roslovic back is not a bad idea. However, there is the issue of a roster spot who comes out because of that. And you also have to consider, I think the team's number one target to trade right now, if they, oh wait, I don't know what happened there. Give me 1 second, please. All right, there we go. We got that fixed. In the event that they want to trade anybody, that guy is more than likely Jesperi Kotkaniemi. If they were to move Kotkaniemi out, you still have a hole at center. Now, there's 3 possible ways you fill that. Or I'll say 4, even though the 4th one is incredibly unlikely. The top 3 are about equal likeliness. We saw Roslovic play center at times during the regular season last season. We saw him play some in the playoffs. He's pretty solid there. He's an offense first center, which kind of is antithetical to what the Canes typically go for with their entire lineup, but particularly when you're talking about the forwards, their centers are all expected to be defensively responsible guys. That's part of the reason why Kotkaniemi is not really fitting in as well as a lot of people had hoped, myself included. 2, I think KK does need a fresh start. I would like to see him stay, but if they do move somebody out to bring Roslovic back, especially if he's looking for a deal with term, they have to either move out a deal with term or figure something out later and move out somebody else to keep Roslovic's spot around, or maybe he can be part of a trade package later. But Roslovic is somewhat of a quantifiable asset in regard to what the Canes might want out of him and why they might make space for him and how they might utilize him. 2 and 3 options, Stankoven and Jarvis. As far as potentially playing center, that's been talked about before. It doesn't sound like that they're going to go that route. We will see. But that's 2 other options you have there. The 4th option, and this is the one I want to emphasize, is highly, highly unlikely, and we're going to talk about him more later in the show. Ivan Ryabkin. I think that this guy is going to try and really, really push for a roster spot. I'm highly unlikely he gets one out of camp just because there's no space. But as far as him being someone who could potentially make them think about keeping him, that is there. And we're going to talk about him a lot as we get into the prospects aspects of things here, or the prospect showcase aspect of things here in a little bit. So it is something to think about in regards to bringing Roslovic back, but one of the forwards has to go if you do. Robinson's contract is really good. Carrier's got a no movement clause, so he's not going anywhere. Blake just got extended. Stankoven just got extended, so it won't be either one of those guys. And, of course, everybody else in the forward group, Aho, Jarvis, Ehlers just got signed, so it's not going to be him, definitely. Plus, he's one of the few definitive top 6 forwards this team has. It's not going to be Jordo. It's not going to be Martinook, obviously. That wouldn't do any good because then you remove one of the more consistent pairings as far as the forwards go between Martinook and Stahl, so neither one of them are going to go. So I would imagine that they're looking to move Kokoniemi and then plug that hole at center another way. Or maybe they consider moving Svechnikov. I hope they don't. Svechnikov had a really good playoffs, and I think that he can build on that. I really do. So we'll see what happens with that. Now, the next thing to look at here, we did see that tweet from the Russian reporter regarding Kirill Kaprizov. This is not a realistic possibility, but a possibility nonetheless. Cam Robinson said, according to sources, and he's with EP Rinkside, reports that the Wild have approached Kaprizov's camp for a trade list appears premature. Make of that what you will. We'll see. So Kaprizov is currently making $9 million, and he rejected a lot more money. This guy, if he went out to the open market, he could get, I don't know, $18, $19 million. That possibility is there. He is that good. And this is where we have to look at the projected cap space that the Canes have. $10,644,184. That does not cover Kaprizov. This is where you got to start thinking about who do you move out? And you have to move somebody out to make this trade happen regardless. Because if Minnesota actually does offer up Kaprizov, they're going to want at least one roster player in return. And at that point, that's where you start looking at someone like Svechnikov and Kokoniemi. But even if you trade one of those two guys, that still doesn't cover all the space that you need. Now, that being said, he's still got one more year of this $9 million cap hit. So you could make that work for now, but you still got to worry about it later, and you still have to get Nikishin signed, and you're looking at around a $10 million AAV for Nikishin, I would imagine. That's just a rough estimate on my part. But a roster player has to go out to make this work monetarily long-term. A roster player has to go out to get Minnesota to accept the deal. They're not going to take strictly futures for a player as good as Kirill Kaprizov. And when it comes to the futures, the Canes, for the first time in a long time, are actually kind of thin on draft picks in 2026. They have the first rounder from Dallas, no second rounder, no third rounder, no fourth rounder, no fifth rounder, 2 sixth rounders, and a 7th rounder. I promise you the Carolina Hurricanes will not draft only 3 players at the 2026 draft. They will probably trade that first round pick back to get 2 picks. They will then trade one of those 2 picks back to get 2 more picks. And then they will probably trade the 5th rounder back to get 2 more picks. Or if they were to bring Roslovic back and strictly trade someone like Kokoniemi for draft picks, they could replenish a good chunk of their pool. Maybe, depending on who's interested and what draft picks they would be willing to give up. Or it could be part of a larger trade. Those are both distinct possibilities. We will see. There's a lot to look at there. As far as Carolina being able to make this work monetarily right now and put an extension in place and then figure it out later, they could do that. They have enough cap space to trade for Kirill Kaprizov right now and cover his current cap hits. The year after that, that's where you got to figure it out. Now, in addition to having this roughly $10.7 million in cap space now, the cap will go up again, probably 4, or if it keeps trending the way it has been lately, where it seems like they want to expand it aggressively, you could be looking at it going up 5 million as opposed to 4, something like that. So you can do that. There are possibilities there. I don't think that this will happen. But if Tulsky doesn't pick up the phone in a particular situation like this and at least try to ask some questions, it would surprise me. Something to keep an eye on, but not something to get your hopes up about, in my opinion. So Kaprizov, here's the biggest reason that Carolina is looking at this kid, other than the fact that it's just well documented that he's an elite player. He hadn't had a ton of playoff appearances, so don't worry about those sample sizes too much, even though we are going to talk about them. In 319 games played, this dude has 185 goals, 201 assists, and 386 total points over the course of 319 games. That is well above a point per game average. Goals for percentage, 59.40 on a team that's not as good as the Hurricanes. Corsi, 49. That won't be a problem. Once he comes to Carolina, that's going to go up a whole lot. Goals for per 60, 1.26. Points per 60, 2.68. So when you're talking about a guy who's going to clock 20-so minutes of ice time every night, him being a point per game, 1.2, 1.3, easily. That'll be a bad night for him. He could be 1.5 on the regular, especially playing with the type of team that he has around him. Now, looking at his edge data that's down here, he's a little bit on the slower side. And yeah, we know he's small. Where Kaprizov makes up for that is his hockey IQ, for one thing. He's not fast, but his edge work is remarkably good. He's not physical, but he doesn't need to be because of his ability to evade people trying to hit him just because of how smart he is when he has possession of the puck. And he reads the play really well. He can kind of anticipate things before they're going to happen. That benefits him as a possession player. That benefits him as a playmaker. That benefits him as someone who can create open ice, find lanes, and score a lot of goals. In every single season that he's been in the NHL, minus his first one where he played 41 games and where he played 55 games, this last season, he only played 41 games because he had some injuries. He has had more than 40 goals in any season that he has played 67 games or greater. That's a big deal. This team's not had a legitimate 40-goal scorer since Jeff Skinner, and his game was very incomplete. Kaprizov's defensive numbers are solid from what I was looking at earlier, and we'll talk about that more in depth if the event arises that we need to. Tulsky learned a lot from the Rantanen trade. He learned about some of the cutthroat things that go on between NHL GMs. He won't fall for that trick again, I don't think. Like I said, there's an old saying, if you're going to mess up, get it out of the way early. Tulsky did that, and he's learned a valuable lesson going forward in regards to making these transactions. If he's going to make a move for someone like Kaprizov, he is more well-equipped and more knowledgeable to do so now than he ever has been. I guarantee you he's looking at this guy. I don't think he'll do anything, or I don't think he'll get anything done. He'll try, but actually getting it done is a completely different ballgame. We'll see, but like I said, not likely. We can hope so, but not likely. Now, here's the next thing that we're going to look at here. We have the Hurricanes training camp schedule and the Prospects Showcase schedule. The Prospects Showcase starts tomorrow. It is at Advent Health Center Ice, which is in Wesley Chapel, Florida, which is the Florida Panthers practice facility, I believe. Yeah, it is. So tomorrow they will play at 2 p.m. We will be live for that. We'll be doing a watch party unless something changes, but I don't see any reason why I wouldn't be able to do that tomorrow. It'll just be a fun little hangout time where we can just kind of hang out and BS. I'll take notes about the prospects. We'll do a little 10-minute pregame thing, a little 15, 20, 30-minute postgame thing, just kind of depending on what goes on. But it's a good chance to look at some of these kids and see how they're doing and where their development's at and everything, and talk about which prospects we're the most excited about, which ones impress us most, which ones we think we need work or that we think need work, whatever. 5 p.m., Tampa Bay Lightning will play the Nashville Predators. I don't care about that. Nashville and Carolina will play on Saturday, also at 2 p.m. I will try to be live for that one. I don't see any. Wait, shit. I'll be at work. I won't be able to be live for that one, I don't think. And then at 5, the Tampa Bay and Florida will play again as well. They'll have a practice day on Sunday. Then on Monday, 3 p.m., Tampa will play Carolina in the last game of this particular showcase. I will be able to stream for the one on Monday, September 15th, more than likely. Saturday is going to be a little bit difficult. I might have to jump on mid game if I do it at all, because I'll be at work that day. Now, as far as the players attending this prospect showcase, we're going to talk a little bit about each one of them, or we'll mention each one of them, but some of them I'm going to talk about more than others. Bradley Nadeau, left wing, 5'11", 172. This kid has a cannon of a shot. He is right now the top prospect on the Hurricanes since Nikishin has made the jump officially. Felix Ungerstorm, oh, wow, they're listing him at 6 foot now. That's good to hear. 184 pounds, right-handed shot. He's definitely got more of a Teuvo Teravainen type of game to him, but I also see a little bit of Aho's game in him as well. His development with Chicago, it plateaued a little bit, but adjusting to the North American game coming over from Sweden can be a lot. And also we have to remember this kid was the youngest player in his draft class. So he hadn't grown into his full body yet. He hadn't had, he was a few months behind. This doesn't sound like much, but when you're talking about someone being 6 months older than you and having 6 months worth of ice time more than you, that is a pretty big difference in terms of trying to stack up in the draft. Justin Robidas got a little bit of NHL action last year, one of those short, stocky center types. Alexei Hemosalmi, he's basically a depth piece at this point. Ivan Ryabkin, we want to talk about this guy a lot. Ryabkin signed his ELC, and he's already in North America because he's playing with the Muskegon Lumberjacks. There is a distinct possibility, not a big one, but there is a distinct possibility that Ivan Ryabkin is very impressive at camp, and the Hurricanes are going to have some difficult decisions to make in regards to maybe potentially keeping him, at least for the first 9 games of the season, before they would have to make a decision to send him back and trim the roster up. Those are things that you have to think about. Next 4 players listed, they're all depth guys that are on AHL and ECHL contracts, part of the depth chart. Charles Alexis Legault. The best way I heard this guy described, Matthew, our friend Matthew P. did so, he's basically another Brett Pesce. Biggest difference is this guy's got a really heavy shot, and he's even more physical than Pesce was at the outset. He's very big. He doesn't jump in on the rush a whole lot, doesn't generate a ton of offense, but when he does execute zone exits, they're very controlled, they're very tactical, they're very well thought out. More than anything, he's definitely a shutdown guy. He actually kind of has some shades of the old school stay-at-home defenseman. He has a lot of it. Joel Nystrom, we'll talk about him some more another time. I actually don't know a ton about him. I've done some reading on him, but not enough to really talk about him that much. Dominic Bedinka. This is someone to keep an eye on for 2 reasons. One, he could potentially be the type of player that a rebuilding franchise or a franchise that is competing even anywhere on that spectrum. Another team could look at someone like Dominic Bedinka if they're a little bit thin on the blue line, and he could be part of a bigger deal. Or if his development goes really well, it could line up with about the time that Gostisbehere's contract expires. And as you know, right now, the Hurricanes are a little bit offset with having 3 or 4 left-handed defensemen and 2 right-handed defensemen as far as the starting depth chart goes for the defense. That could be a guy who comes in when Gostisbehere's contract is up and evens that back out. We will see. Gleb Trikazov. This is a guy that I was really excited about, and I hate that his development got kind of messed up with the injuries and stuff that he had last year. I'm hoping for a big bounce back season from him. I liked a lot of what I saw in this guy's game at the last prospect showcase. Excuse me 1 second. There was one particular play that I saw where he initiated a board battle that he knew he could win, and he made little things like this are really overlooked sometimes, these small important details of the game, but he initiated a board battle and he ended that board battle on his terms. He waited until he could get the puck exactly where he wanted it to go, to whom he wanted it to go, and make sure that that player that he passed it to had enough time and space to make a good play out of that, make a quick transition play, get to the other end of the ice, and have a clean entry. Little things like that are good. On top of that, Trikazov's a pretty physical guy. He's big. He goes to the front of the net. He throws hits. I don't see him being anything more than a bottom six grinder with a touch of skill and with a scoring touch. He could do that. We'll see. I'm hoping for a lot out of him. Rest of these guys, ECHL, and AHL guys, and a couple of invitees as well. Then when you go and you look over at the goaltenders, you have Nikita Kwap and Ruslan Kozeyev. Both of those guys are worth keeping an eye on, especially with the Hurricanes having some of the issues that they've had. Goaltending, Semyon Frolov recently had a shutout the other day in his KHL game, but these are the two in particular that we're going to keep an eye on just because they're the only two there. So this is going to be an interesting thing to watch here. It really is. So more than anything, I'll be watching Bradley Nadeau because as far as players who could make the jump, he's number one right now. Felix Unger-Sorum, we got to see if maybe his development is going to start getting back on track and that he's going to continue to grow. Philip Ekberg, we'll keep an eye on him too. Justin Robidaw, seeing a little bit of NHL action. Kind of curious about what his ceiling could be, but I don't think he'll be anything more than a depth piece, unfortunately. The one person who might be able to displace Nadeau from the top of the Canes prospect pool is Ivan Ryabkin. You heard me and Matthew P. absolutely rave about this dude. And there's a lot in his game that looks really good. Last weigh in, he'd lost a few pounds. I think that he lost 7 pounds. Reese, if you're in the comments, remind me because you were the one that told me. That's a lot for a hockey player. That's a lot more lean. That's a lot more speed. Charles Alexis Legault, I beat that horse to death as far as talking about how excited I am about that kid and how I think that he could be Nikishin's future partner even. So we'll see. We got a lot of good stuff going here. So I'm really looking forward to tomorrow watching this. All right. So I'm going to get to the comments here, because I actually haven't answered any of them. I'm sorry, guys. I just got on a roll and I kind of kept going. And again, I want to thank you guys all for joining me tonight. I know some of you saw the stream I did earlier where I kind of felt like it felt good for me to talk about some non-hockey related things for a little bit, considering that the world's kind of messed up right now. But now I'm back to business as usual, and I was able to do that because I was able to kind of get that stuff off my chest. And we're gonna have a good time from here on out up until the start of the season. Not saying to ignore the things that go on in the world by any means, but at the same time, we got to have our distractions. We got to have our recreation. We got to have our fun. So BTS says, hey, what's up, bud? Good to see you. B says, wasn't Kaprizov injured a lot recently? Yes, last season he was. That happens to every player at some point or another where they have a season that's kind of injury mired. Hopefully he'll be okay and everything like that. Slump says, I love Jack Roslovic's shot and the fact that he took Mikko's money. Hope we can keep him. Yeah, and he got a really nice watch out of it too. So, yeah, but someone's going to have to go for that to happen. Now, that also raises the question, how do you employ Roslovic if you do bring him back and who moves out? I mean, I know I talked about it a little bit earlier. Roslovic has more good qualities than bad when it comes to being a player. But the thing about it is, on a deeper team, could you slot him in as the second line center, even though this is a team that, doesn't number its lines, and him be effective? To some degree, yes. To the degree you need him to be to win a Stanley Cup, probably not, if I had to say. And I hate saying shit like that, or I hate saying things like that, because Jack Roslovic is a good player. And I think that he, like I said, he brings a lot more good than bad to the table. But as far as having that type of role on a competitive team, I personally don't see that. Now, considering the Hurricanes have such an emphasis on their depth being good, their defense being good, their bottom six being good, there's a place for him if they move somebody out. The problem is, one, you have to prioritize who you would and wouldn't move out. And it would send a really bad message. Apparently, when the Hurricanes have such a problem attracting free agents as it is, or such trouble getting players to want to play in Carolina, I should say in general, you do run a big risk if you trade someone like Blake or Stankoven after you just extended them. There's that to think about. So that's why I'm wondering who they would, and Eric Robinson for that matter. That's why I'm thinking, who would they have to move out to make that work? That's the problem. Now, additionally, we also know William Carrier, speaking of injury prone players, William Carrier is someone who is essentially a 13th forward that is slotted in when he's healthy. And that's not a knock on Carrier's skill. He's a 13th forward because of availability, not because of capability. Maybe that's another reason they're looking at bringing Roslovic back. I don't know. There might be something bigger at play here. We'll see. If and when he signs somewhere else, of course, that would be off the table. So not sure just yet. AB says NC State is killing me. Killing me. I'm sorry. Fuck them though. Hope they lose. Matthew P says, evening. Thanks for talking hockey, brother. We all need this now. Well, thank you guys. Like I said earlier, if I didn't have the stream I had earlier where I could just kind of talk about stuff, because like I'm relatively new to the area that I live in. Basically, the only people I have frequently around me, well, two of them aren't people. It's just my dogs. I can talk to them about shit all day long, but they're not gonna know what the hell I'm saying unless it's sit, stay, lay down, treat, or walk. Oh shit, I shouldn't have said walk. Even though I already took him on one. And then, I've got friends I can text and talk to on the phone and everything like that. But it was easier to just kind of hop on the microphone and vent about those things earlier. And then I could finally take a deep breath and say, okay, cool. It's time to get back to business. And that's what I did. AB says Frank needs to bring us good luck. Well, that's not happening. He's a Tar Heels dog. Rosie will be a good depth piece. Yeah, no, he definitely is. It's more so a question of how he would fit, how you employ him, and who has to get moved out for that to happen. That's where the hang up is. Cabri also says Carrier, Rosie, Smith. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I got to see how that ends up working out. That's the only thing about it. Oh boy, lots of comments. Brian Hauser, what's up, buddy? Need to go for Kaprizov. I'm sure that they're monitoring that situation. I would be very surprised if Tulski hasn't at least picked up the phone to try and initiate a conversation. That would surprise me very much. I think that the Canes are definitely, it's like the joke that's been going on with this team for years. The Canes are allegedly in on whatever player, and then they're like, well, they're in on every player. They were in on Kachuk, but it just hadn't happened yet. So we'll see. Skylark says, yes, Kaprizov is always injured, unfortunately. Yeah, that's one thing that you also have to be conscious of. Somebody who wants to bank that much money but has an injury history. I think Minnesota would pony up what he wants if it wasn't for that. That might be the driving force behind Minnesota saying, we're not paying you. Or, well, see, the thing is, Minnesota offered the money despite him being that injury prone, and he said no. And I think that whatever his next ask is going to be, where Minnesota takes a hard line and says, no, you're too injury prone for that. And that's a tough thing to go through when you're in either your contract year unsigned or July 2nd going into your contract year unsigned. That's something that does kind of muddy the waters when it comes to contract negotiations. And they will not lose him for nothing. If they did, that would be awful. Slump says it was around 7, if I remember correctly, which doesn't sound like much, but it is. He also says, loves how you handled the tragic events recently on the timeline. Some crazy people on there on X. Yeah, I'm not going to say too much more about it, but it's just hard to see things this way, man. It really is. I mean, I've thought about that guy and his family like nonstop since it happened. I don't even know the dude. But I can at least feel bad when something bad happens to someone, whether I agree with them or not. Like, for example, there was a teammate I had on one of my old veterans teams. I fucking hated this guy with a passion. I hated playing with him. I hated everything about him. I had nothing good to say to him at all, so I just did my best to refrain from talking to him. Well, he lost his dog. And y'all know me, I love my dogs. At that point, what I didn't like about him didn't matter. I took the time to reach out to him and give him my condolences. If we can't get back to that, this country's not going to make it. That's all I'm going to say about it. I think Slump says I think we need to at least keep him for some type of trade package, that being Roslovic. Yeah, that's the thing about it. It's like this is a situation that can have several different outcomes. It really can. Av Clark says Rosie had a 54% face-off percentage. Yeah, I talked about that on his grade slide. Let's see here. Let me go back to it real quick because this is from last year. Rosie's definitely got more, or Rolex as I like to call him. Rolex has got a lot more good than bad to his game. A lot more good than bad. The thing is, if Roslovic was a little bit better defensively, particularly not getting lost on the back check, because his zone defense ain't that bad. If he was a little bit better at that, and maybe it would be mitigated by the team being a little bit better than it was before with the offseason acquisitions, Miller and Ehlers in particular, and with Stankoven and Blake are definitely, especially Stankoven, are going to take a pretty big step out of camp, I think. It's definitely something that I want something like that to work where you could have Roslovic slotted in that second line center role and him be a producer, do what he needs to do defensively, and take that step and be that guy. There's not really a true offense first center on this team. The closest thing they've had to an offense first center since Eric Stahl was traded, and Eric Stahl's game rounded out after a while. Like the year the Canes won the Cup, Eric Stahl was very much an offense first center, very much a power forward. And he refined his game, refined his two-way game, and he became a much more well-rounded player as his career went along. Now, I'm not saying Jack Roslovic is on the level of player that Eric Stahl was, because he's simply not. But he's simply not. But there's actually a lot of stuff that he does well. If he could be in that role, that would be great. And on a team that's not contending, he probably could be. Av Clark says he definitely could be slotted in. Yeah, I see ways that this could work, especially if Kokoniemi were to be traded. I see ways that you could potentially have him in that role. But as far as it being what the Canes need to not lose to the Panthers or anybody else for that matter in the conference finals, that's where it's more of a problem. A little bit harder to see for me. Av Clark says, by the way, this is Cavery the Cane. This is just my YouTube account. So, hey, everyone. Oh, wow. Okay, that's cool. I actually didn't know that. I thought y'all were two different people. That's cool. Slump says, my list of who I would like to keep would go Stankoven, Blake, E-Rob. Yeah, see, I was expecting Blake to get traded, honestly. And then they extended him. Now, granted, he doesn't have any trade protection or anything, but you got to be careful about trading guys right after you extend them, because then players really will not want to come to Carolina, because they sign those deals, especially if you sign team-friendly ones like Blake and Stankoven did, where you get two things out of it. One, you get your immediate financial security, so you can go buy a house, buy a car, set up shop there, right there in Raleigh. And two, you take team-friendly deals so that the team around you can build something better. So you're expecting reciprocation there from the organization that you won't get your life uprooted. That's the danger of trading anybody that's mentioned right there. Then you might have a harder problem attracting free agents or getting people that you trade for to extend, which over this summer, that wasn't a problem. They got the top free agent, Nikolai Ehlers, someone who's going to be a good fit. They got Stankoven and Blake and Robinson all extended. And like I said, until this day, I apologize to Eric Robinson, because I was expecting him to start the season with the Wolves and be a call-up. Now the dude's a mainstay in the lineup. He played his ass off. And I have nothing but respect for how he plays. So I would be upset if they traded him too. Something has to happen, though. There's too much unused cap space. And the team, as far as what the roster needs to look like to make this work, is kind of incomplete. Maybe there's a goalie trade to be made in there that would involve one of the forwards, and then you bring Roslovic back in. There's a multitude of different things it could be. But whatever it is, I don't think it's done yet. They might start the season with the roster they have right now, but I don't see it being very... I definitely think it'll be different by the time that the playoffs come around, or by the time the trade deadline comes around, maybe as soon as January. But I think the closer you get to the trade deadline is when that possibility grows bigger. And I think that the team that you see coming out of camp could have a couple of surprises. Ryabkin maybe, unlikely, but if he did take that step, if he took, that's not a step, that's a leap if Ryabkin does that, to the point where he plays well enough to where they force the team to keep him there. And then he plays the first 9 games. He shows that he's NHL caliber and they never send him back down. That can happen. The only reason Sebastian Aho didn't play in the NHL on day one is he already had a commitment to play for his dad's team in Karpat. He was good enough to play in the NHL on day one, but he already had his commitment to play over there. And I'm sure he's glad that he did that because he won a championship over there for his dad's team. Additionally, he scored the championship winning goal. It doesn't get much better than that. That's a really cool story. Brian Hauser says, bring Rosie back. Yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I just wonder how it's going to work with them moving somebody out. Could get rid of KK and Jang for Rosie, then sign him to a good team deal and then trade him away for a better center. Yeah, there's that too, but Roslovic also is looking for term. Okay, I wasn't going to talk about this either. I know that some of you in the group chat, I told you about this. A friend of mine that is within the Washington Capitals organization actually told me, I want to say it was about 3 weeks after free agency closed, 2 weeks after free agency closed. This guy has good information normally. I kind of didn't buy a lot of it, but he knew about the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade the day before it occurred. So there was that. And then he told me that Washington and Roslovic had actually had a deal, but Roslovic was okay with the AAV, but he wanted more term, and Washington didn't give it to him. And Washington was basically keeping Roslovic as the backup plan in the event they didn't get Ehlers. So once Ehlers signed with the Hurricanes, that's when apparently that deal was worked out, but Roslovic didn't get the term he wanted. He was okay with the AAV, from what I was told. And the guy who told me he's pretty well connected. I never shared it at the time because he said there's a big potential for it to fall through because he wants more term. And that dude has no reason to lie to me. So that's why I think that number-wise, AAV-wise, it's probably not too far off regardless of whoever he's negotiating with. He just wants a longer-term deal. That's what I think is going on. Other than the input I got from my friend, that's pure speculation otherwise. But that's what I would imagine. Slum says, I go to every Canes versus Wild game. Half my family lives in Minnesota and half in North Carolina. Oh, that's cool. So I go to all the road and home games between the Wild and Canes with Love Kirill. Who do you think we would have to give up for him? So I talked about that a little bit in the earlier part of the show. In that earlier part of the show, I talked about how a roster player of some sort would have to go out to make that happen from a standpoint of not only making the money work and the projected cap space for next season when his extension would kick in would work, but also to get Minnesota to accept a trade like that, because they're not going to trade a player like Kaprizov strictly for futures or strictly for depth pieces. You're talking about Svechnikov and or Kotkaniemi, someone like that going out. Now, a lot of people talked about, oh, maybe Nikishin. Nikishin's not going anywhere. Nikishin is part of the long-term plan because Jacob Slavin, whether you want to believe it or not, because it feels like he just showed up to the Canes yesterday, he is on the other side of 30. Now, with the way that he plays, since he's not super physical, he has speed, but he doesn't have to utilize it a whole lot because his edge work and his gap control is so good and so technical. The key to the defense staying elite later in life is going to lie heavily in Nikishin's capabilities. So there's that to consider as well. But if I had to guess out of any of the current roster players, I would say KK or Svechnikov or some combination of both if it's a bigger trade. That's where it gets kind of murky if it were to happen. That's part of the reason why I don't think Kaprizov would make it, because let's say you did make a trade of, say, KK Svechnikov and throw, I don't know, Bradley Nadeau in there. They're not going to be able to pay all those guys, especially if Nadeau pops off and has a really, really good couple of first seasons in his ELC, or a good second season in his ELC, I should say. And then at that point, you got to look at how much you're going to pay him. So that's where it kind of falls into at. Skylark says, sadly, if we can sign him, he'll demand something like 7 by 15 to 15.5. If you're talking about Kaprizov, he's probably looking for more than that. Yeah, it's going to be a lot. If you're talking Kaprizov, you're talking a minimum of 18. More like 19, probably 19 and a half, maybe even 20. Like the world is his oyster with that right now. And Edmonton is probably watching whatever happens with Kaprizov very, very closely, because that could have a lot of influence on McDavid's contract. Skylark says, I'd personally like to sign a more proven player for that kind of money, not to mention one that's less injury prone. Yeah, that's also another thing to consider. Av also says, I feel like Rosie would be better defensively if he gets another year in the system. He definitely could be. He definitely could be. Will says, sorry, I was mean with that one tweet that one time. Hope it's going well. Buddy, I have absolutely no ill will, no pun intended, towards you. And I have no room to talk about writing mean things about people on the internet. I would be the biggest hypocrite on earth if I ever criticized anybody for writing mean things about people over sports on the internet. I hope you're doing well too, pal, but absolutely no hard feelings, bud. Let's keep KK. I know AB does not agree. Well, AB's watching State get their ass kicked right now, apparently, so he's not in a good mood. Because he's been texting me about it, but I had to take my watch off because it kept distracting me from doing this. AB, I'm not trying to ignore you, buddy. I promise I'll get back to you when the stream's over. Brandon, you are the best. No, you guys are the best. Thank you, but you guys make this fun. It's a lot of fun to do this because, like I said, I had to kind of get some stuff off my chest earlier with the unfortunate event that occurred yesterday, and then I come in here tonight, and because of that, I'm able to kind of cut loose and go back to doing what I enjoy doing with these streams and everything like that. The Hurricanes as an organization and their fans are a very underappreciated market. And it took me, and there's so little visibility on that team as a whole. Here, let me switch back to that. There's so little visibility on the team as a whole in the grand scheme of things that I didn't really know there were other Hurricanes content creators out there. I listened to one episode of Locked on Hurricanes when I think that Jared Ellis was the guy running it, I think was his name. And all he did was talk garbage about Tony DeAngelo. I think I got 10 minutes into that episode and I was like, okay, that's enough of that. That was that. Raleigh98 says Roslovic lost a lot of offensive confidence towards the end of the year, but his best is good enough for 2C. Yeah, that's a valid point. He's got that potential there. It's really there. The biggest thing that holds KK back is his skating. Roslovic doesn't have that problem. Roslovic is an excellent skater. There's just little gaps in his game that are just kind of incomplete. It's just a lot. There's some things he has to work on. Now, getting a second training camp in, getting a full season in, being on a deeper team where maybe the lines won't get shuffled so much. Please, Rod, don't shuffle the lines so much. Maybe that brings that part of his game out. But that's there with him. I can see why so many other teams are interested in him. I can see why, if what my friend told me was true, that Washington had him as a backup plan in the event that they did not sign Nikolai Ehlers. William Maxwell says, hey, it's John Carlson, gang. Sorry I started following you by trolling, but hope all is going well. Dude, it is all good. I promise. I'm not upset about that at all anymore. If anything, I was the one who was wrong in that situation because I was just kind of being mean that day, and you didn't deserve that. And I've learned that when I get pissed off about things to just kind of put my phone away, because I didn't have social media for a long time. I got rid of Facebook in 2014 and I had no social media, except I had a Reddit account at one point for a little while. And that was one of the worst decisions that I've ever made. And then I got back on social media and I just kind of had to learn that, sometimes when you're not in a good mood, the best thing to do is just stay away from it for a little bit and log out. And I should have done that day. And, there were numerous other times where I was kind of mean to you and other people. And I've learned to not do that so much. Part of it is because I'm much happier with where I live now, because living up where I did live was just kind of wearing me out. And mentally, but yeah, no, dude, it is all good. That's interesting because I wanted Jack Roslovic. Yeah. From what my friend told me, and he's well connected in that organization, they said that they had a deal with him. He wanted more term, and that's where it fell apart at. Av Clark says, damn, Svets Nadeau and probably some picks for Kirill. Yeah, and they got to be careful with trading picks right now because as you saw, here, let me bring it back up. As you saw, no, it wasn't this one. Where is it? As you saw, the Canes actually are a little bit dry on picks in 2026. So they got to be careful with which ones they trade. Granted, they're loaded in 27 and 28, but they might need some of those picks to get some of the 2026 picks back if there's certain players in there that they really want. There's a lot of different things there that could happen. Kirill wants to play with Ovi. He'd only get 1 year from him unless Ovi keeps playing. And I thought I could have swore, like, my friend Anthony, he's one of my best friends in the whole world. He's a really big Caps fan. I remember him telling me that Ovi, like, had already said that he was going to finish up his current contract and he was going to go play a year with Dynamo Moscow, and then he was done, which I don't blame him because the guy's been playing hockey since, like, forever. It's... I could see that, though. It's just they wouldn't get to play together very long. It's the only downside. Av Clark says trade KK for picks and sign Rosie. See, that's the thing. That's a possibility. No, like you say LOL. You say LOL to that. That's actually something I could see happening. If they feel like that Roslovic can really take that type of step and still develop into a top 6 center, which he's got a lot of those elements to his game, as I've said already, and he just needs a little bit more to it, then you could just trade Kokoniemi to somebody and strictly, get a couple of picks for him and start to reload that 2026 pool. Because Vancouver's been interested in Kokoniemi before. I saw something that Buffalo had been interested in Kokoniemi before. Now, I'm going to hate to see KK go, but I think that it's what's best for him and the organization to probably do that. Av Clark says, yeah, I've been hanging out with Ovi. Will also says, Av Clark, I need it. Yeah, like that would be pretty cool combination. I still use Reddit to watch people lose $200,000 on Wall Street bets. That's funny. Raleigh 98 says, until they trade for a proper 2C, maybe they just rotate between Rosie, Jank, and KK for 2C, whoever's got competence at the time. Yeah, I would like to have someone more clearly defined in that role, because then the line juggling might not happen so much, because I think that's part of the reason the line juggling happens so much. Because you know who your top center is. You know who your top 3 wingers are. You could say 4 now with Stankoven. The one place where there's a question mark and then it kind of has a domino effect throughout the lineup is the second line center spot. And when I get the chance to talk about the defensive pairs and how I think that they're going to line up, then that's when I'm really going to go into detail about that. And then I'm going to do a separate stream in regards to the forwards. But I'm curious to see how it's going to work. Because the thing is, there's been plenty of other times where you can kind of narrow down something to 2 or 3 different outcomes. This has a bunch of different outcomes. There's a whole bunch of different ways it could go, especially as you get closer to the trade deadline and teams start to fall out of contention. There's a bunch of different things that can happen there. So we'll see. Will also says, I think Roslovic is who he is at this point. He is, 28? Yeah, he is. That's the thing. It's like it would have to happen like right now if he was going to take that type of step. Slumped also says, kind of random, but I would love Tage Thompson. Oh, buddy, you must be new here. We talk about him all the time. Him and Dylan Larkin are like our two biggest dream acquisitions on this channel. Like, we talk about them all the time about ways we could potentially, or ways the Canes could potentially land them. That gets talked about a ton. So that would be something. And we'll have to see. Maybe Buffalo starts to fall out of contention and maybe they do pull the trigger and finally get, trade Tage. Maybe Tage wants out of there. I don't know. There's a bunch of different things that could happen there. But it's something I'm not going to concern myself with too much until at least January, and then I think the clock starts really ticking on that. But yeah, we've talked about Tage and Dylan Larkin in particular a lot. Tage would arguably be the most impactful player we could trade for long term. Yeah, him or Larkin, either one would be my 2. They both would move the needle significantly. There's certain qualities that one player has better than the other, and vice versa. For example, one of the things I love about Larkin is his speed. And it's not just his speed itself in isolation. It is how he can maintain that speed with possession of the puck, and snap of a finger, he's made, whether it's a 2 or 3 foot short pass between somebody's legs, or he's went from the top of the circle in the defensive zone and put somebody on a breakaway on the other end, and then catches up to them to make the follow-up play with that speed. It's just he thinks, he acts, he thinks, he acts, he thinks, he acts, and it happens so quickly. His ability to reflexively react to the play and move his feet as quickly as he does is the biggest thing that's always impressed me about Larkin's game. Tage is my dream dream. I just started tuning into the lives when y'all were doing the draft show and pre-draft shows on who we want. Okay, yeah. No, we've talked about, yeah, it's good to have you here. And we've talked about Tage a ton. We talked about Larkin a ton. Honestly, it's a coin toss for me. I wouldn't be upset with getting either one of them. If I could just pull a lever and have either one of them, that's tough. I'm probably taking Tage. I'd probably take Tage between those two. Will also says Larkin is obviously faster, but Tage can move quick for a big guy. Yeah, Tage has got some speed for a big guy. And what he does, the way that Tage does it, it's not so much his foot speed itself, it's how good his stride extension is. It's the same thing with someone like Jack Eichel. Jack Eichel can cover more ice with less steps than almost anybody I've ever seen in my life because of how good his stride extension is. Jack Eichel's stride extension is almost something revolutionary. Because you see the way that he does it, it's not like a full-on hunched-over stance, and he's still doing the toe flick, he's still got his knees bent, and he's still pushing outward and everything like that. But it looks like he kind of does it upright, and he kind of falls into his stride, like he just kind of leans over and steps into it, and that he uses his core just as much as everything else to do that. It's like what a lot of people were only using their legs for. It's like he's activating the rest of his body in his stride. And there's a lot of cool YouTube videos about how Jack Eichel does that. And I noticed that with a lot of American players nowadays. So I'm wondering if that's the way the USA Hockey development program is doing it now, how the national team development program is doing that now. They definitely do look different to me. When I was growing up, and I didn't get to play a whole lot when I was growing up, that's part of the reason I play so much now while I'm still young enough to do it, is they were always telling us you have to have your knees bent, you have to be down in the gorilla pose, as they called it, and everything. See, and I'm a top heavy dude, so that doesn't really work really well for me. And I'm not the greatest skater to begin with, but I'm decent at it, but I'm not anything special. Skating like that is kind of difficult for me. And one of the things about it is I actually skate better backwards than I do forwards. That's part of the reason I play defense. That, and I enjoy it, and I can't score goals to save my life. It's just not in my DNA. So it's just kind of the way that it looks like the way they're teaching people to skate now is a little bit different than what was going on before. And Jack Eichel and Dylan Larkin in particular are pretty big examples of that. What's up, bro? Nikishin for Norris says Larkin over Tage for me. Yeah, no, I see the argument for both of them. Both of them have certain qualities that are better than others. I wouldn't be upset with either one. But like I said, with Larkin, the way his speed and his brain work together, how in concert his ability to make plays and keep his speed together, it's always been amazing to me. And Tage is like, he's got all the power forward elements to his game. And then Slump said what I was going to say next. He has a bomb of a shot, dude. His clap bomb is ridiculous. He is fun to watch on the power play, Tage is. Slump says the only thing that makes me want to tune into Sabres games is Tage and Darlene. Yeah, I'm not a big Darlene guy. I'll admit that. Tage is just a remarkable player all around. And, it's like his situation in Buffalo, let's face it, it ain't good. So we'll see what happens with that. Ethan Reed says, no deal for McTavish. Giving you any pause for thought? In my opinion, he meets both value and reality for our new 2C. Yeah. I've talked about McTavish on here before, and there was actually someone, I forget his handle, but he goes by C. He's got ECU and he's got an ECU pirate and a Canes logo in his ad on X in his profile picture. He brought up the point that he thought McTavish was a little bit too slow. And eventually I am going to talk about McTavish more ad nauseum than I am now. If McTavish could get faster, which he's capable of because he's still young, he could, lean out, drop a little bit of weight. And when it comes to stride extensions and stuff like that, there are little things that you could do different. flick your toe a little bit more, bend your knee a little bit further, get a little bit lower in your stance, or, there's a lot of things that you can do there where you can get another 2 inches out of each stride extension, lose 5 or 6 pounds. And then you're talking about someone being a mile per hour faster roughly than they were before. And that makes a difference. So that would be my one little bit of a hang up with McTavish. C did bring up a good point in regards to the speed, because you need speed to play in Carolina. You definitely need it to play center the way that Rod wants his players to play center. So it's something to look at, because according to NHL Edge data, McTavish is actually a little bit slower than KK and Jordo. So I've definitely given some thought to Mason McTavish, especially if he would be willing to take a shorter term deal so that the Canes could figure out some other stuff with cap projection, with maybe trading for an additional player, getting Nikishin done, all that type of stuff. Will says, I wish I was knowledgeable about your skating actually playing. It makes watching tennis a lot more interesting for me as someone who plays, but I never did much beyond learning to skate. Yeah. So my dad played tennis. Actually, he was really good at it. He played tennis when he was in high school, and anybody who thinks that tennis is an easy sport, you would be in a rude awakening if you ever tried it. Like, it's incredibly hard, and those guys will get messed up to take a dive to reach 6 inches to get a ball and get a good hit on it and get back up and get ready for the next one. Tennis is a very difficult sport. See me, someone who's built like me, I don't think I could ever be a tennis player. I'm way too slow. And my arms are way too short, and I'm really stocky too. So it's like my shoulders are really, really wide. So it's like tennis is hard as fuck. As far as hockey goes, like, I didn't get to play much when I was growing up, and part of that was because I had other ambitions at the time, and it's something I just did for fun when school was out and during Christmas breaks, and I'd go play pickup, and I did a couple of camps when I was growing up, but that was about it. And I learned a lot of that stuff about skating after I got out on my own, because like when I was the first couple of years I was in the Navy, I was kind of miserable. And I ended up hanging out with a friend of mine that was also from Fayetteville. And he told me that there was an ice rink there in Chesapeake. I'm like, oh, that's cool. So we drove over there and checked it out. And I went home to Fayetteville because Chesapeake was only 3.5 hours away. I lived in Virginia Beach because I was stationed in Norfolk at the time. I went home one weekend and I grabbed my gear, and I came up there, and I was like, I'm just going to play for fun. I'm not going to take it too serious. And the first time I went out there, like, I didn't have my skates on tight enough. I totally forgot to put my gear on because I hadn't played in like 3 years at that point. And then I got to the point where I'm like, I really enjoy doing this. I think it would be more fun if I got better at it. So I started watching videos and, kind of teach them. I essentially had to reteach myself things that I had kind of taught myself before and then got better at them. So those are things that I kind of started to learn on my own. And it was a lot of fun. And, it's never too late to learn. Like, I didn't really start extensively playing until I was 20. Part of that is because hockey is expensive. So when I was out on my own and I had my own money, it got a lot easier to be able to do that. But yeah, it's fun. Tony D, what's up, buddy? Well, I love Darlene, bro. He's insane. No, Darlene's a good player. I'm just not a big Darlene nerd. That's all. No, he's an exceptional player. He's really good. He's just not one of my personal favorites. But no, he's a great player. Tony D says getting Larkin is more realistic than Tage. Yes, I agree. We'll see what happens with that. Depends on who falls out of contention first, but like the Red Wings are pretty stacked as far as depth and prospects and players who could take the next step. Buffalo is too, but as far as a team that I think that would be willing to move essentially who the team is built around and feel like that they can still make steps forward, I think Detroit is definitely in a better spot to do that. And then them moving someone like Larkin, they could get enough pieces back to make them, if they handle it correctly, and if they get what they need out of it, they could get enough pieces back to make them competitive relatively quickly, like immediately. Av Clark says Larkin and Aho would be a nasty 1-2 combo. Yes, it would. Slump says, I remember the first time seeing Tage's clap bomb, I was amazed. The last season was my first season getting deep into the hockey community and watching more than just the Canes. Ethan Reed said, with how this free agency has unfolded, if Rosie re-signs at a cap-friendly deal with the suitors we all know we had around the league, Carolina is truly a destination. End of story. I agree. And people would be like, oh, but it's just Roslovic. Well, it was just Ehlers. It was just Orlov. And free agency has been kind of diluted the last few seasons, and that's only going to get worse. The reason for that is the landscape of the NHL changed a whole lot during the time frame of when the shortened season occurred, and then or that ended with the bubble playoffs, and then the bubble season after that, all that stuff that happened for reasons that were totally not related to a virus that came from China. And that kind of changed the landscape of the league, especially financially. Now, if we're talking about that stoppage never occurred, the cap's probably $4 to $8 million, maybe higher than it is already. But now they're playing catch up with raising the cap. And that means that with it going up, teams are going to try harder to lock down the best players they have, their depth, everything. Whether it's a bottom six grinder or their top six center or one of their top six centers, they're going to work harder to lock guys down now than ever because of how dry the free agency market is. And it's only going to become more dry. The free agency that you saw this last summer, unfortunately, I'm afraid is going to become the status quo. I'm afraid that's going to be the rule and not the exception. Then, when the NHL inevitably expands to 34 teams by the end of this decade and 36 by 2025, and the talent pool gets further diluted, then it really won't be fun because everyone will just lock everyone up and get a supplementary piece here and there. And teams are building through the draft now because you have a hard salary cap. So free agency as we used to know it, the crazy day that it was where everybody was hitting refresh at 11:59, 12 o'clock, and 12:01, I don't think we're ever going to see one like that again. I really don't. Because if a team can't retain an asset, they trade it for everything they can get, and it's normally like a sign and trade type of deal. Like, for example, Marner. Marner was going to be a big free agent. Never made it to it. So there's that to consider. And goalies, you'll never see a top 32 goalie hit the market again. That will never happen again. I don't think you'll ever see starting goalies get traded again, honestly. Like, that's just the way the landscape of the league has changed, in my opinion. Tony D says, where would Roslovic fit, though? Already want to carry or Jankowski will be forced out of the lineup. Yeah, that's the thing we've been talking about the whole time. Ab Clark says KK would have to be yeeted. Wow, damn, dude, you're making it sound like, no, that's not nice. Ab Clark says, Tony D, trade KK for picks like Rosie. Have to see in a bit for a bit and use his value for an upgrade later. Yeah, and see, that's the other thing we have to concern ourselves with how much term Roslovic is asking for and what type of trade protection he would be potentially asking for. So there's all those things in there. There's a lot that could happen here. It's kind of we had a saying in the military, hurry up and wait. And that's kind of where we're at right now. It's a hurry up and wait type of situation. And I think that the team that the Canes have right now, and pretty much around the league for that matter, I don't think we're going to see any big trades by any means. You might see a one-for-one depth move here and there. But for the most part, I don't think anything else is really going to happen right now. So the next thing we can do, watch the prospect showcase tomorrow, see what we've got with some of these prospects, see what, how they're doing and everything like that. We'll get a first really good look at Ivan Ryabkin, which is who I'm going to personally be watching the most, see how Nadeau has progressed, and see if he's a little bit closer to making the jump, which again, there's not room for him right now, but we'll see. The Canes might have some difficult decisions to make, like good problems to have type of difficult decisions to make after camp. And then during that first 9 games of the season before they have to trim the roster down. We may see some interesting things there. As far as transactions, trades, and everything, I don't see that happening for right now. This Kaprizov thing could potentially blow the whole lid off of that, though. That's the difference. But, all right, well, if nobody else has anything, I think I'm going to... Tony D says, I don't see a rookie either than Nikishin making it out of camp. Yeah, Nikishin's going to make it. That's not going to be a problem. Yeah, that's the only thing. Like, if there was a spot, Nadeau would probably make it, kind of like Blake made it last year. And I knew Blake was going to make the team last year. And like I told you guys, the reason I knew that wasn't because of what I saw of Blake, like player wise and on video and everything like that. It was what I saw. I saw a picture of him doing farmer's carry. This kid's forearms were like out to here, and he's got this giant vein bulging out of it and everything. And I was like, yeah, Rod's keeping that kid. He ain't going nowhere. And Blake does have some things he needs to work on with his game. Top 6 ceiling still there, but I definitely see more of a top 9 guy, a middle 6 guy, something like that. A definitive top 6 forward, not so much. Stankoven, on the other hand, that kid's a top 6 forward. There's not many players I say that about where I definitively say, yes, that kid is Stankoven's top 6 forward, especially playing for Rod Brindamore by far. Artemonov, Nadeau, and first as a start for Kaprizov. That wouldn't even get the phone call started, honestly. However, Artemonov is he's starting in the VHL this season. He's had a bit of a he's had a bit of a rough start in Russia, and he was someone that the organization sounded like they were excited about. I was pretty excited about him myself, but if his development's kind of taken a step back and you could include him in a package like that, yeah. If you want to make a big trade happen as far as prospects that they're willing to give up, Nadeau's a little bit easier to quantify as far as what he would bring to the table for the Canes and for other organizations. So including him in a trade like that would work. Nadeau is also not at the top of needs for the Hurricanes outside of his shot. He's another undersized winger, a good one, but there's already a bunch of those. Nadeau would probably go before Ryabkin, even without accounting for looking at Ryabkin and Nadeau side by side, which at 2 p.m. tomorrow we're going to get to do a little bit. So that's going to be interesting to see. But that would kind of maybe that wouldn't really start the conversation. That would be the foundation of it. If they called Guerin and gave him that, he would be like, okay, we'll talk, but you have to add this, this, and this. And they would probably at that point, that's when you would start looking at throwing Svechnikov in. But the more I look at it, that's a lot. And, me and AB and Griff were talking about this earlier in the Sams. That's a lot for a player that I would be worried wouldn't play 82 games more often than not. Slump says, I love Blake. I hope he can follow in Stankoven's steps. Yeah, the biggest difference between Stankoven and Blake, and this is not a knock on Blake's skating because it's pretty good. Logan Stankoven is one of the best skaters that I think I've ever seen. Logan Stankoven's skating is second only to Natchez as far as Hurricanes forwards in the Rod Brindamore era. That's how good Stankoven is of a skater. Ethan Reed says, I feel this roster that will start this season. Yeah, me too. I am already manifesting a late night ESPN noti in December about our trade that completes this team. Larkins and Thompsons will come mid-season. Tulski has done all the things he can right now. So excited for the trajectory of this group. Carolina won the offseason. I agree. I think that I think there's I'm trying to think of how I want to say this because what I was going to say initially was going to make me sound stupid. They definitely won the offseason in terms of making the team better. As far as you had a net loss, or you had a loss in one player, but you had a net positive with the one that you brought in and replaced him. The young guys like Blake and Stankoven, you expect them to take big steps. Ehlers brings that veteran presence and maybe finally gives Aho that elite talent that he needs next to him to really, really. Aho's a 6th speed. He's in 5th gear, but he needs someone else to help him hit 6th. So bring him in there. And yeah, the team definitely improved, but that glaring hole at second line center, however they can solve it. I mean, if they do say move KK out and bring Roslovic in and have Rolex play second line center and he actually really figures it out and becomes that guy, that would be a godsend. And another reason I'm okay with potentially going that route is I know that, and I was wrong about this. Let me make that abundantly clear. I was totally wrong about this. I advocated up and down for Martin Natchez to play center. And part of the reason why I did that is, one, I thought he was capable there because I still think as far as just God-given talent, Martin Natchez had more God-given talent than anybody that ever wore a Hurricane sweater. He just never could put it together. And the other reason was, let's just say you do catch lightning in a bottle moving Natchez to center, kind of like you did with Aho. you've solved a lot of problems at that point. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. And I was so pissed that they never really gave him an extensive look there. Then he went to Colorado, and there was one night he had to play center, and that experiment lasted not one game, one period. And then I never mentioned that again. I was like, I was wrong. When I'm wrong about something, that's that. Objectively speaking, that was one of out of all the things I've been wrong about, that has to be in the top 10. And there's probably 100 things I've been wrong about, but that one stands out. How wrong I was about trying Natchez at center. Tony D says, I'm willing to throw in Svech for Kaprizov. Honestly, forgot him. And my one reluctance with that, well, two reluctances. One, Svech had a really, really good postseason. And two, moving out, even though Svech has got a little bit of injury proneness himself, moving out one of the few physical forwards this team has to bring in someone like Kirill Kaprizov, who's not really a physical guy at all. He doesn't need to be with the way that he plays. But if you're talking about physicality out, lack of physicality in, you're taking a big net loss in physicality. And that's the two biggest reasons I would be reluctant to move Svechnikov, but at least maybe you would still have KK in that situation, so you have someone who will go out there and lay the body. And this team does need every team to some degree needs that, but a team that heavily relies on forechecking and 200-foot play, having someone bring that war of attrition, lay the body game in the forward group would help a whole lot. And like I said, I don't think Svechnikov and Aho have chemistry in most situations, but the times that they did the most was when Svechnikov was playing his natural position, and that's the right wing. That's one of the things that I've been consistently annoyed about. And that's one thing I definitely still think I'm right about, is that Svechnikov would be much better off playing on the right, where, let's say he's playing with Aho and Ehlers, and they're constantly feeding him pucks, and then he can, get more quality shots off, get to the middle of the ice quicker, and have a better picture of the net in a lot of situations than what he normally does shooting from the other side. And Svechnikov has been a right winger his whole life until he got to the NHL level. And then now he's not. Now there's a lot of players that do that play center and end up being wings, or, for example, or end up playing right wing when they were playing left wing, even though they've always been a offhanded shoot first type of winger. And then they end up playing on the other side. I just think it would heavily benefit Svechnikov and the Hurricanes as a whole if he played on the right side. If you remember, for a long time, Aho, Teravainen, and Svechnikov were a very, very effective line. And Svechnikov was on the right. He got a lot of quality shots on net with Aho and Teravainen with him. Two left-handed guys who were playmaker for, especially Teravainen. Teravainen wouldn't shoot a puck to save his life in some situations, and Aho's done that a few times in the last season in particular. And I know I've talked about this extensively before. Like, all I want for Christmas is for Aho to shoot the puck more. So that's one of those things that I believe as well in that regard. That would be my reluctance with that, because kind of injury prone player being swapped out for kind of injury prone player who is less physical, even though more, if you're talking about God-given talent, Kaprizov has more of it. That would be my one reluctance with that. But you also might have to make that trade because Svechnikov, I think, makes $7.5 million. You might have to make that work just so that you can project out the money to have for Kaprizov when the extension would kick in if you pay him $19 million, which is about what he would command. Raleigh 98 says Blake still gets to the puck first a lot, but I agree. Stankoven's skating is insane. Stankoven's skating is some of the best I've ever seen. It's his ability to start and stop, cross over, turn on a dime and be gone is unbelievable. People are like, oh, I wish Stankoven was a foot taller. I don't. Part of the reason he's able to skate so well is because of his size. I have to address this. Give me one moment, please. Paniac says, and I quote, burgers tonight. Past tense, burgers tonight. But he also says, burgers tomorrow. To which I say, burgers forever. Burgers forever. Holy shit, we've been on here for an hour and a half. Okay, guys, this has been fun. But I need to get up and go to the gym in the morning because I didn't make it there today. So I have to do 2 muscle groups tomorrow instead of 1. So if I'm walking around like this tomorrow when I go to stream at 2 o'clock, and if I'm having a hard time punching the keyboard, don't be surprised, because I have to do back, shoulders, and arms tomorrow because I didn't go to do back and shoulders today. So I will see you guys tomorrow at 2 p.m. I should be live about 15 minutes before that. And we will talk about whatever during the game. I'll be sitting here taking notes, talking about some of the stuff that I see. Thank you all very much for joining me. Slump says, have a good night. You have a good night. Pizza forever. That's one of my other favorite things. I've laid off of all that stuff that I love. Now, here's one thing I'm really proud of myself. When I lived up in Nova, there were two things that I really liked that weren't really close to me. There was no cookout near me, and there was no Waffle House near me. And for a long time, there was no Bojangles near me. Little did I know that was a blessing in disguise, because I've just basically stopped eating stuff like that. I have not went to a Waffle House a single time since I got down here, and there's one on every corner. And I also have not. I've only went to Cookout twice since I got down here in April. 3 times if you count me getting it while we were in the process of moving here. And that was something I used to really, really struggle with every time I drove a place like that and my stomach was remotely growling. I'm like, Ugh. But luckily I've been able to resist that temptation. So, and I've got about 32 more pounds to lose before I'm going to let myself go to a game. So I got a long way to go, but I'm getting there. Slump says, I feel bad for anyone who hasn't experienced Bojangles in their life. I love Bojangles. It's by far my favorite fast food plates. I actually got some of their seasoning like by itself because they were selling it at Bojangles. I ended up not liking the seasoning that much. And I think it's because I wanted to put it on my grilled chicken just, because I was trying to eat healthy, but I still wanted that Bojangles flavor. And it actually kind of sucks, which is weird. I guess it's just made specifically for fried chicken. So maybe I'll try it next time I do some wings or something, because I've still got it. But we got some other Cajun seasonings that we mixed up to put in our, because we do stuff on the grill almost every day. Like we're on the grill literally almost every day. That's one of the best parts about living down here in the South. We've got a grill behind our patio and we grill something every day. Like tonight when I made those burgers, it was 10-minute process. It was really cool. Sports Tweeter, what's up, buddy? Thoughts on how the WNBA has fumbled the Caitlin Clark 22 situation? I actually don't watch the WNBA. I don't watch basketball at all, really. I watch some Heels college basketball once in a while. That's about it. I've never watched the NBA, actually. I don't think in ever a day in my life. And the Hornets don't give me a reason to tune in. So Slum says, I always put extra seasoning on my fries. I love the seasoning with anything. Yeah, that seasoning is really good stuff. I will leave you with this. Here's one of the funniest things that I've ever experienced. There was one night I was moving out of one of my apartments in Northern Virginia to go to a different one because I found a better one for a little bit cheaper. And up there, that was a godsend. I'm sitting there and I'm scrolling through Uber Eats. I'm tired as I can be because I've been moving stuff all day. I got most of it done in one day. I had an aggravating morning just because of things. And I put my dog Frank. I put him in his crate because he stayed in a crate back then because he was younger and he's crazy. You're still crazy though, aren't you, buddy? And I'm scrolling through Uber Eats, and the first thing I see is and I'm not even a big McDonald's guy except breakfast. I love their breakfast, but I avoid that now. And this was back when they still had all day breakfast. I thought about getting that, but for some odd reason, I was just in a mood. I was in a mood, so I'm like, you know what? I just ordered the 50 chicken nuggets and couple of large orders of fries. I think I was just exhausted because I hadn't eaten for like a day and a half, and I was just wanted the greasiest, most calorie ridden thing. So I ordered that and a couple of cheeseburgers. Yes, I did eat all of it. I'm not going to pretend that I didn't. I was in the process of ordering it. I got it ordered and it said it'll be there in like 26 minutes or something like that. I'm like, all right, cool. So I'm like, I'll take a quick second to call my dad. I called my dad and I said, hey, I just thought about something random. And he's like, what's that? So my grandfather, he had this thing that he did. McDonald's fries are the saltiest fries I've Okay. If anyone's still here. But yeah, but no, it's like my grandfather, he put a bunch of salt on McDonald's fries, even though they were already salty. And I think the reason why he did that was because I remember him talking about the food that he ate in the army when he was like in Vietnam and stuff was like just and tasteless and kind of sucked. He's got in the habit of putting salt on everything. And he didn't eat breakfast a whole lot. He ate breakfast all when he was because of powdered eggs. And I don't blame him. Powdered eggs are kind of gross. I've never had powdered eggs in my life that were good. Maybe there's some good ones out there, but I never did that. And that's one of the cool things about being on the ship. They actually made eggs for you on the ship. So I definitely like there's some things that were better in the Navy than a lot of other services. All right, everybody, this has been a lot of fun. This is the best mood I've been in a couple of days. So everyone, thank you so much for everything. I will see you soon. I will see you tomorrow around 2:00 for the game. Everybody have fun. I will see you next time. And above all, please be safe. Take care of yourselves.